This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host for this week's episode, Paul Jasley, filling in for Mike Rapin, who is busy catching them all, I assume, playing Pokemon Go somewhere. But I'm not alone. I am joined in the IRCB studios by two half-melted Spider-Man-shaped ice cream novelties, Brian Murray.
Hey there.
And Zach McCrary.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back, guys. We took a whole month off. It's good to be back. Hopefully we've gotten most of the ring rust off. We remember how to do a professional podcast here, talk about comic books, because that's what you're here to listen to us talk about. Of course, I, as the host, I'm legally obligated to ask two questions to my co-hosts. How have you been, and how have comic books been? Let's throw it over to you, Brian.
I've been good. Your quick West Michigan weather watch. It's hot and sticky. It has been for what feels like years and will be for the rest of my life, as far as I can tell. But I've been keeping cool, staying in the basement here in my little recording studio. I've recently been trying to catch up on some older issues, which is kind of my constant state, I guess. But I finally got around to digging out some of my old Alien issues that I've been picking up and not reading. Nice. So I read the issues that comprise Icarus, Alien Icarus, volume 3, I think. It's the 2022 run. I don't know. They've restarted these numbers so many times. I don't know what's happening anymore.
That's a question for Nick to answer at some point for us, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that he would do so with concise brevity.
How long ago at this point was that picked up by Marvel? Was that so? Like, is this run you're talking about? Is that Dark Horse, or is this under the Marvel banner?
This is the Marvel.
This
run.
Is Marvel stuff.
Yeah, it was. I don't know exactly when it was. 2019, 2020, somewhere around there.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was in the before times. But I don't know by how much.
We don't have histories dating back this far.
Yeah, exactly. This book opens up basically like any good Alien property would. Just a brief moment to show you that if you're that into capitalism, it's going to kill you. We get a brief view of a Weyland-Yutani like research planet where we have the announcer is talking about how it's great here because there's no government regulations and all the choices are up to you, the investor. And that's like put over scenes of mass panic and xenomorphs tearing people apart and stuff.
As it should.
Then we get to the actual meat of the book, which features a group of synthetic people referred to as Steel Team, who are basically like an elite military squad of synthetics that decided they were done being used as weapons and decided to go off and find their own planet to live on. Unfortunately, as in any we're out of that life story, they do get pulled back in for one more job.
Of course.
In this case, a colony world has been nuked, basically, and they need to go and recover some kind of prototype anti-radiation serum that Weyland-Yutani was supposedly developing on the planet that we saw at the beginning. And in exchange, they are told that any synth who wants it can get United Systems citizenship.
Okay.
After they do this, which I'm sure was a legit promise that no one was planning to go back on as soon as the job was done.
Never. Definitely not.
They end up going to this planet, and you'll never guess it's completely overrun by xenomorphs. They do find a small pocket of survivors who do what I think is objectively the smart thing, if not like the kindest thing, where they find out that the Steel Team is here looking for a xenomorph egg that Weyland-Yutani used to develop this serum. And so the survivors are like, okay, sure, yeah, we'll help you find that. We'll show you where the queen's nest is. And they lock them in with the queen, and they're like, we cannot let you take an egg off this world. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Which like is cold as ice, but also like I respect a good quarantine.
Feels timely. Yeah.
Yeah, forever and ever timely. There's a whole bunch of radical synthetic versus xenomorph violence. By the end, we have 2 remaining synths and 1 remaining human. The cool twist, and the thing that actually gets the humans killed, is they find a Weyland-Yutani lab, and they find these like insect experiments that they'd been doing. And one of the synths takes a sample because it wouldn't be an alien property if we didn't have somebody making a bad decision like that.
Yeah, right.
It gets out and bites one of the humans, and she like transforms into this weird alien human hybrid. It's very cool, and it's not like an instant thing. Like we slowly see her like transforming over the course of like the last couple issues.
Ooh, some good body horror stuff.
And yeah, classic Geiger type thing. Humans let her in because they all have ID chips implanted, and so they scan and go, oh, our friend is back, and then they open it and it's this horrible carapaced monstrosity and a swarm of xenomorph drones that follow her in.
Wonderful.
But
That's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's very alien, and I appreciate that.
That's why I've never read any of the Alien comics. I'm a pretty casual fan, but like the premise always sounds so fascinating, and if it's well executed, and it sounds like this one kind of is, I might want to check this out.
Yeah, and it references some of the other events from the Alien comics, but there's not like crossover characters or anything like that. So if you just picked up Alien Icarus, you wouldn't know what they're talking about when they refer to like the spinner colony that got attacked by aliens.
Okay.
Which was, I think, like the previous volume. But honestly, like it would not impact your enjoyment of the story.
I think that's one of the strengths of the Alien as a franchise, is that there's not really a through line story so much or too much. There is lore, but it's pretty like quickly explained. It's not radically deep. It's just like, yeah, capitalism is bad. There's this undercurrent of, the first Alien movie kind of feels like a metaphor for sexual violence in a way, and like that kind of gets swept under the rug by the second movie, but it's always kind of there as well. So yeah,
and like any good Alien property, this does like introduce new and weird shit about the xenomorphs, like this whole bug alien hybrid thing. But it's also not like, it's not dependent on previous lore. Like you kind of like do whatever you want with these because they're so self-contained.
Yeah.
So like this creepy alien lady is on this planet, and no alien property ever has to address her again unless they go to this planet.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's smart. That's smart franchise writing.
Yeah, because like once you're through like the Ripley saga or whatever you want to call it, all you have to do is, oh, here's an abandoned place. This used to be Weyland-Yutani. They did really messed up stuff here. Oh, look, there's aliens. How are we going to survive?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it kind of writes itself.
Yeah, it really does. They figured out a great formula for that. So cool. That sounds interesting. I should jump into these Alien comics.
Yeah, like I really want to see that new Alien Romulus movie. Have you guys seen previews for it? Like while he was talking, I was like, this sounds a lot like what that preview looked like.
Yeah, I have high hopes and low expectations, is I guess how I would describe my feelings.
Smart.
It's really the best way to engage with any franchise media at this point.
Absolutely.
It does look very much like a horror movie, which I guess if you're going to try to reboot the franchise, that's probably the smartest thing in my opinion. So let's make it spooky, make it scary.
Oh yeah.
Zach, what about you? How have you been, and how have comic books been for you?
I've been great, man. Eastern Maryland weather watch, it's also very sticky and hot and uncomfortable, and the rain makes it worse whenever that does happen. But otherwise, everything's been it's good, man. We were just talking, watched SummerSlam last night with a bunch of friends. Also went to a bachelor party. It's been a good weekend. Got to read a bunch of comics. Looking like excited to be, as always, back on I Read Comic Books. and telling you guys about what I've been looking at. And that would be a book called William of Newbury, numbers 1 through 3, from Dark Horse Comics. I read. It's a writer, artist, letterer, Eisner and Harvey Award winner Michael Avon Oeming. And
Nice.
this book is like, this was one of those books that I just grabbed on a whim just because I thought it looked cute on the cover, because it's like anthropomorphic animals. So you're in 12th century England, but with anthropomorphic animals. And you've got this character named William, who is a prior and an exorcist, who is like looked down upon by others in his priory for spending his time with undead and demons and fairies, especially fairies. They don't like the fairies. And it's interesting because he's like the only one that can see this stuff for whatever reason. Like we have that gets explained within these 3 issues. I'm not going to spoil that though. But he can see these things. So when he goes to these villages and people, you're like, hey, this is happening. Can you help us? He actually is able to see these things and take care of them for them. And he's got this brother who is a rabbit and is also the abbot of the priory. His brother Edward. And Edward does not like the shit that his brother is getting into. They have very different ideas of what it means to, show your faith and to earn your place, in heaven and things of that nature. And he doesn't like the way that William spends the priory's money, or like the taint that he feels he puts on it. So you get like this kind of monster of the week vibe from the issues where William's going town to town and helping people, but you also kind of have a through story of these 2 brothers and their issues with each other's life choices, even though they're on the same path, but they have very different ways of doing that. You know what I mean? And funny, the fun fact, the whole thing is based on the writings of William of Newbury, but spelled Burgh because the British. And he was a historian from the 12th century who wrote the book called Historia Rerum Anglicarum, which told British history, but also included like stories he had heard of revenants and the undead and green children from the fairy world and stuff, because it's the 12th century. And and so it's fun. At the end of each of the comics there's a thing that says based on the true writings of William of Newbury, and I was like, that's fun. Yeah, this is
it's true that he wrote that.
Exactly. The true writings. He did in fact write this. It's a really fun book. I liked it. The first 3 issues kept me interested. I like the characters and where they're going. I think it's a little heavy-handed on the religious stuff, but at the same time, it's 12th century. They are people of the church, so it makes 100% sense. And so that didn't really bother me at all. I thought that the art gave me a very Secret of Nim vibe. Do you remember that cartoon?
Okay.
That it was like cute, but also kind of dark when it needed to be, and it wasn't always too toony to take seriously, if that makes sense. And
Gotcha.
So I thought that this was a really good time. Oh, there's also this thief named Winnie who's following William around as he's doing his ghost busting, and because she tries to rob him on the road, and he winds up like taking her under his wing, and they become friends. And so that dynamic was also really fun, watching this thief and this prior go and fight monsters together, and how they both approach it differently. And I love that there's this ongoing theme of him wanting to like bless her before each thing, and she's like, whoa dude, I don't want God looking over here. Like, I've done a lot of stuff. I don't need him. I don't need that direct, that direct light. But yeah, it's a really fun book if you want something like this. And I mean, like, if you're not familiar with William Avon Oeming, he also did the book The Mice Templar. So he likes playing with anthropomorphic animals in medieval settings, and he's won awards for it. So I think this book's worth checking out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like Michael Oeming's art a lot. So yeah, I have not heard of this book, but it's definitely up on my to-read list now. That sounds great.
If we think of it in terms of like the Disney Robin Hood, how fuckable are these animals?
Okay, so if like on a scale of we're not hitting Robin Hood levels. Like this is not Maid Marian Fox. Like I know those feelings you're talking about, and I did not have them about any characters in this book. Any of those awkward "this is an animal" feelings. Or like, no, kid from the Rescue Rangers fits in your hand, Zach. She can't be your girlfriend. That's not 40-year-old Zach. That was like 8-year-old Zach. Just so everybody is aware.
Yeah.
This is a judgment-free zone,
That's
so
right.
I'm glad we can openly discuss this. Yeah.
No, but they're cutesy, like secretive dim characters. Yeah.
Well, speaking of stories about animals, the book I read this week is also deals with sort of anthropomorphized animals. This is a book that I kind of picked up almost on a whim. I'm sure we've all done this, where like when I get my copy of previews, I'm going through it. There's a book like, oh, that sounds cool, and I'll order it and completely forget that I ordered it until 3 months later. I'm at the shop, like, oh, we have this hardcover book for you. I'm like, what? And like, here it is, and it showed up for me this week. It's called Hogbook and Lazer Eyes. It came out from Fantagraphics last month, and it's an OGN that was written by the stand-up comedian Maria Bamford and illustrated and co-written by her husband, Scott Marvel Cassidy. So I love Maria Bamford. I've very particular taste when it comes to stand-up comedy, but I think Maria Bamford is hilarious and a genius because she uses her own battles with mental health issues as a fuel for her comedy, but it never feels like preachy or like therapy. It's very funny, but it's the way she views the world through those issues that she has. And if you're familiar with her work as a stand-up, you'll understand this book. She also did the show Lady Dynamite on Netflix, which I think is a fantastic use of the sitcom streaming show format to address mental health issues and look at herself and her own career that way. But anyway, this book is illustrated and written by her and her husband. And it tells the story of how they met through a dating app, OkCupid, their first few dates and how their courtship went, how they eventually got married. But it's told through the perspective of the rescue pugs that they had around the house. So you get the point of view of these older, usually with poor health pugs. So the whole story is, again, illustrated by Scott Cassidy, who has a very it's a sketchy style, but it kind of makes sense. It's a loose story. It's not a direct, this happened, this happened, this happened. You kind of get these interjections from the animals explaining and then I joined the family. And then of course, inevitably, because they're pugs and they're old, they get sick and few of them pass away. And those moments are really incredibly touching because it's like, the one pug has been living with another for a few years and suddenly the one passes away, like Blueberry passes away. And then her friend Barney is like sad for a few pages, and the illustrations that Cassidy does of the pugs running across an open field with a big rainbow behind them. As someone that's had to put down a few senior dogs myself in the past few years, like those moments hit pretty hard. So it's a weirdly emotionally engaging story, even though it's kind of silly and self-referential and at times very humorous because, that's the nature of Bamford's work. So it's hard to put into words exactly why I love this book so much. Again, I think it was that emotional connection I had between, as someone who'd had dogs that had to put down with a partner in the past, that relationship combined with the relationship with the dogs, combined with my knowledge of Bamford's work and her own history, it made for a really entertaining read. It's a book I kind of want to go back and reread every few years to see maybe I'll get more out of it each time. But it was a pleasant surprise to pick this up at the comic book shop since I'd forgotten ordering it in the first place. So, and for those that are wondering, Hogbook and Lazer Eyes, the title, those are the names that Maria and her husband Scott used on their dating profiles. So Maria was Hogbook and Scott was Lazer Eyes, which I think explains a lot about the relationship, the fact that they met each other using those names. So
see, I was hoping that those are going to be two of the pugs.
I thought so too. Yeah.
right. Which that's initially what I thought too, but then on the first page they explain that. So no, it's a really cute book. It's very personal, which I really like autobiographical comics, and this does that. But the fact that they kind of tell it through the sort of Greek chorus of these elderly pugs makes it even more charming in a way. So it's definitely a book worth checking out. Whether or not you're familiar with Maria Bamford's stand-up or not, I think a lot of people would enjoy this book.
I love that idea of telling the story of a relationship through the animals that the two people own together. That's fun.
Yeah, and you kind of get to know the animals too. And it's like they each have their own personalities. There's a couple pages where Scott Cassidy, the artist, will just draw one page and it's 12 panels of a dog taking a nap. And it's like, yeah, nothing's happening, but you kind of like, it fits the story. It's like, oh yeah, that's the vibe we're going for here. It's great.
Right.
So there's one page that's told from the perspective of the dog bed that all the dogs share. And it's actually like really touching. So it's a weirdly emotionally touching and affecting
That's
book.
great.
So yeah, highly recommended. So those are the books that we read this past week. And of course, there's always comics coming out. Trust me, I've got about 2 months worth of comics, single issues I've got sitting on my desk I got to get through here this weekend.
Dude,
but
I'm with you.
Let's talk about books we're excited for coming up soon. What's on the top of our piles? Zach, let's jump over to you. What's on the top of your pile this week?
So it's on the top of my pile, though I have already started reading it, and that is Murder Falcon from Image Comics, writer-artist Daniel Warren Johnson, one of my favorites. I loved Do a Powerbomb. Oh, Mike Spicer on colors.
Yes.
I actually bought this directly from him, and he signed it, so that was cool. Like I said, I love Do a Powerbomb. I've really been enjoying Transformers from this duo, and I've just been waiting for my pal Damian Becton to be ready to record an episode of my show about this book, because I saved it for him, because he's the one that introduced me to Do a Powerbomb. And finally, he's got a new book coming out that we're going to talk about, and also do the episode about Murder Falcon. And I was stoked to crack that beautiful hardcover open. And man, because I've heard nothing but good things about this, and that it, in the end, it might make me weepy the same way that Do a Powerbomb did, because I openly wept at the end of that book. and
Yes.
like, because Johnson he's like the king of, this premise seems really dumb until you read it and wind up emotionally invested. Like that's just what he does, and he is the master of it. It's a story of a portal opening on Earth that is letting monsters through that feed on bad emotions. And then, once again, there's the buzzword for the week: an anthropomorphic falcon with a robotic arm arrives to save the day. And through the power of guitar shredding of his friend Jake, Murder Falcon fights back the evil facing the planet with the power of heavy metal, because that is literally what fuels him. Which again sounds like such a dumb premise. and like Jake and the rest of his band become like heavy metal Pokemon collectors, as their special instruments are like summoning beings to fight for them while they create tasty jams. And this book, it's just so much fun so far. I can't wait to sit down and finish it today. I love Johnson's art. I love his writing style. You can feel his love for heavy metal in the writing, just like you could feel his love for pro wrestling in Do a Powerbomb. And they say, write what you love, you know? And the story's, it's so far, it's got a ton of heart. There's a lot going on within the relationships of Jake and his bandmates, and the tale gets all too real as time goes on, but there are also awesome fights and cool looking monsters as well. So I'm really excited to finish this one, and I just, anything that guy puts out, I want it, you know.
No, that you explained it really well. Like, I mean, I loved this book too, and I read it a couple years ago. And Johnson's passion for what he's into comes through on the page. Like you said, like he obviously loves heavy metal. He loves pro wrestling, and he's willing to. His passion never feels ironic or self-referential, right? He's doing it because he truly loves it, and like, you know, this is, again, it sounds like a put down, but no, it's the epitome of like a dumb premise, a dumb concept, but it's like so well done. And Johnson's able to express that not just through the story, but through his artwork itself.
Yes.
Like that's one thing I really liked about Do a Powerbomb, was that it's really hard to draw pro wrestling in a comic, because it's such like a motion based art form, like any type of like sport. But the way he was able to get both the visual spectacle and the emotional spectacle of pro wrestling on a page, almost just visually, you almost didn't need a lot of dialogue in that book. And I felt the same thing about when Murder Falcon, I read that, where just like the way he would draw people playing instruments, it's really hard to draw someone playing a guitar and make it look convincing or cool.
Yeah.
And yet he's able to do that. Like you almost hear the sound of the guitar through the image itself. So yeah, he's such an amazing artist to be able to capture those non-visual aspects in his artwork. And it's truly a gift. And I think, you know, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the ending, because yes, I also teared up a bit when I read this book. It's a bit of an emotional gut punch. So yeah, get ready for that.
I heard a really funny story from him. I wish I could shout out the podcast. I don't remember which interview it was, but he was saying he had the opportunity to meet one of like the metal gods that like made him want to do this book, like a guitarist for like an 80s metal band. And he saw the guy backstage or something and was talking to him and like, I wrote this comic and like you were a huge inspiration and da 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 da, and I've loved your music forever, you know, like fanboying out. And the guy heard none of it because he had never worn ear protection while playing, and so he literally didn't hear anything that Johnson just said. It was just him pouring his heart out, and the guy's like, "Oh, hey mate, how's it going? You know, like you like the music?" Didn't hear any of it.
Take it from three dudes in their 30s and 40s. Like, you gotta wear earplugs.
Wear the earplugs, folks.
Never. I never will. No, I only wear earplugs to one show, I think, and I was warned I had to. So when I saw the band Swans, I bought the ticket, and the guy sold me a ticket. He's like, "Gonna wear earplugs?" I was like, "Haha, good one." He's like, "No, you should definitely wear earplugs," and I'm glad I did. So you can look up Swans on your own time, fans, if you want to know what I'm talking about.
It's smart to wear earplugs to Swans.
Yes, it's good choice. But that is honestly one of the best like fan interactions you can have. I'm always so nervous when I talk to somebody I look up to. So if the fact if I wouldn't have to like spend the next few months second guessing, why did I stumble over that word, or why did I say that so awkwardly? If knowing they didn't hear me kind of makes it better.
Yeah, fan interactions are hit or miss. Like there was one guy, I won't get into it too much, but he was like so high when I met him, and he made it so awkward for me that I was like, I just want this to be over. Like, please let go of my hand. I want this to be over.
Uno reverse.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Brian, what about you? What is on the top of your pile this week?
Yeah, I'm going to be reading the second volume of Earthdivers.
Oh, great book.
Subtitled Ice Age. Earthdivers, if you're not familiar, is about a group of indigenous Americans who decide they're going to go back in time and kill Christopher Columbus using this fancy time-traveling cave that they have. I don't remember if the first book got into the specifics of the cave at all, like how it works or anything like that. I know it has to do with like you take an object with you and it will bring you back to like that object's time. So I think in the first volume it was like a compass or something, or a letter maybe. But in this case, somebody brought like an ancient spear point in with them, and wound up in somewhere around 20,000 BCE. So the early days of human habitation in North America. Mm-hmm. I've always been a sucker for like paleohistory and paleontology and stuff like that. Okay. So I was both going to read this because it's Helldivers, and I would read it because of the premise of the ancient Americas take. Mm-hmm. I'm fascinated by that period of like prehistory where 95% of human existence is undocumented. Like right. We don't know because we didn't have words yet. I just think that's so cool.
Fascinating. Yeah.
But I shouldn't say we didn't have words. We didn't have written language.
Right.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff too. Like even up to like things like Göbekli Tepe, where it's like, oh, there's this whole civilization that lived underground. We know nothing about this, why it was there, how they did this. And yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It probably wasn't aliens. I know there's probably people out there that think it was aliens, but I'm going to go on a limb and say it probably wasn't aliens.
Probably wasn't aliens. We're going to kill everyone's dream.
Ancient humans were so much cooler than we give them credit for.
Exactly.
That's so true. Yeah, we it's just so easy to be like, nah, we couldn't have done that. It was aliens.
I personally couldn't have built the pyramids. So
had to be a UFO. Sorry. Well, that actually sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that. Is this excuse my ignorance, is this a video game tie-in of some sort?
No, you're probably thinking of Helldivers.
I think you did say Helldivers at one point, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you
did. I? I'm so sorry.
It's easy to do.
Earthdivers.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of Helldivers too.
Gotcha.
I didn't read this one yet, the second volume, but that first volume with Christopher Columbus, I had a blast reading that one.
It's a really good story, and it's also just very satisfying because who hasn't dreamed of killing Christopher Columbus?
That sounds fantastic. I will have to look into that. Cool. So the problem doing the show, my to read list just gets bigger and bigger every episode. So we have some people hanging out with us on Discord, and they are also reading books this week. The top of their piles, CK is going to be reading Jellyfish. Jeff will be reading Pulp. That's a great book. He's reading that for the Goodreads Challenge. Danny is going to be reading Cruel Universe #1. Kait has El Defo on her to read pile, and then Paul G is reading Fever Year, The Killer Flu of 1918. So sounds timely again.
Yeah.
The top of my pile this week is a book I just happened to find when I was digging through the discount OGN bin at my local comic shop, which again, it's maybe a bad habit I need to break because every time I go in there, I end up with some random books that I wasn't expecting on buying, but luckily they're discounted. They're only a couple bucks each, but this is a book called Wimbledon Green by the artist Seth. It came out from Drawn and Quarterly a few years ago. Seth, of course, did Clyde Fans, which is like his major work. It's a fantastic comic that I talked about maybe like a year or so ago on the show. And this book is credited, or the subtitle is The Greatest Comic Book Collector in the World, a story from the sketchbook of the cartoonist Seth. Just flipping through it, it seems like it's both a love letter to the early days of comic books and also a satire and critique of the industry as it stands today, which seems right up my alley. Seth's artwork, if you're not familiar with it, it's very clean and precise. It has a sort of like Sunday funnies kind of like cartooniness to it, but he has a really good way of capturing emotions and feelings in space in his artwork. Like Clyde Fans, there's a lot of moments that are just like the characters are in deep contemplation, so not much is being said or happens on the page, yet you get the sense of the characters being in thought. And again, how do you draw a character being deep in thought? It's really hard to do, and he's very good at that. So, and this book, because it's billed as being from his sketchbook, it kind of has a more stream of consciousness kind of feel to it. Just a little bit. I flipped through it, like it's almost like each page is a little like snippet of a bigger story, rather than being like a through line, so to speak. Again, I just happened to see it when I was flipping through the bins. I liked the cover. It was $3, so it ended up coming home with me. I'll let you know how it goes when I finish reading it. But yeah, Seth is an artist who I want to read more of his work. I've read his magnum opus, Clyde Fans. Now I'm digging into more of the minutia stuff that he's done, and I'm glad I found this at the shop. Which, again, I'm always an advocate for digging through dollar bins, digging through the dusty, shadowy parts of your local comic book store. You'll never know what gems you'll find. So this is one of them.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing I miss, because I don't really live near a comic shop anymore, so I don't get down terribly often. I actually have all my comics mailed to me by my comic shop. But I do miss just like wandering the aisles and looking for whatever random trade catches my eyes.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I brought this up to the counter, and I've been going to the shop for over 10 years now, probably 14 years at this point. So the owners know me really well. They know my taste. So I brought this book up, and the owner was like, oh yeah, I wanted to get this off the shelf. So I threw it in the discount bin. I knew someone would probably pick it up. And he kind of like knew me. He's like, I kind of figured you'd be the person to buy it. I was like, yeah, you know what I like. So it's always kind of nice. It's like having a good bartender at your local dive. They know what you want to drink. Your comic book owner is your fixer in that way. Your dealer who knows what you need.
I miss that.
I've definitely known some comic fans to take that to the logical extension then of pouring their heart out to the comic shop owner while you're waiting in line behind them.
That part's the worst. It's like, come on. Okay, I get it. Just finish up. I just want my comics. I want to go home. I miss that. Having just moved like an hour away from my comic shop that I'd gone to for over a decade and a half, like you gotta like start all over again. It's like starting a brand new relationship. It literally is starting a brand new relationship.
It really is.
We don't know each other, but I really need you to get to know me so that I can find new fun things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's I guess it's kind of a tangent, but I guess like that's why I still go to my local record shop as much as I can. Same thing. It's like there's something about that physical media and getting to know people that run those shops. It's like it's it is a relationship. I'm not going to go that far and start, getting too personal with them. There's things about me they don't need to know, but it's nice to have that camaraderie. And again, it does establish a weird sense of community, I think. And I think that's really important, which, one of the reasons why every time I go to a new city, I try to find a cool comic shop, just to get that vibe, so yeah. Cool. Sounds like we have a lot to read this week. I'm excited for my read and added a few things that you mentioned to my to read pile. Anything else you want to get off your chest, since we've turned this into a therapy session before we wrap up?
No, I think I'm all set on the therapy
I think I'm pretty good.
Cool. Zach, what was the match of the night at SummerSlam?
Oh,
Tell the people.
That's so hard. Like, you have no idea how hard that is, because this whole card was like front to back was so good. Okay, if I had to pick, LA Knight versus Logan Paul was probably like the best match of the entire card. If I had to pick one.
Okay.
Yeah. They both put on a clinic. Like, I hate Logan Paul, but God, I hate how much I respect him as a wrestler, because for coming into it so, like, just like a couple years ago, it looks like he's been doing this for years, and it's ridiculous, and I hate it, but I can't help but respect how good he is at it.
Was he the one that was going to fight Mike Tyson? Did that ever happen?
That's his brother.
That was his brother, right?
Yeah, that was Jake Paul.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's going to happen, but like Tyson got sick or something, so they had to reschedule.
Right.
Tyson was giving him one last chance to back out.
I think that's right. More likely. Okay, well that helps me out, since I'm gonna have to watch SummerSlam tonight. I can maybe do some highlights and at least make time for that match for sure. So cool. I want to say thank you to Mike for letting me sit in the host chair this week. I always appreciate it. I want to thank Brian and Zach for joining me. Thank you, Kait, for proof listening. Thank you, Zander, for editing the show. Thank you, everyone that joined us on Discord, and those of you listening right now. We appreciate you all. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you.